What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Postgame Show right here on the channel and on X. And unfortunately for all of us Met fans, the Mets get swept for the first time this year to the Tampa Bay Rays at home at Citi Field, 9-0, and a big old dud for the New York Mets today. Ton of men left on base, ton of opportunities, 9 walks on the day for Mets pitching. Just overall bad performance all around, and we got to talk about it. That's for damn sure. And this is the biggest issue that I continue to talk about. And we can talk about pitching all we want. We're progressively getting worse game by game in pitching. And that's all I have to say about that part, because I was just talking about it on the pregame, guys. Not saying that Griffin Cannon is going to be a complete horrible shit show the rest of the year. I'm not saying that, and that goes for all the pitchers in this rotation. But it comes to show you, when you worry about innings limit, when you get lesser players or lesser pitchers in this rotation because it's cheaper, not because of any other reason, and you got to find, a needle in a haystack, and you got to do it multiple times in a rotation, you're going to find yourself having issues. And this is the problem that I had. Like, is anybody shocked by this? This is Griffin Canning, guys. This is what he's done his whole career. Trouble with location, walking a ton of batters, and he's this type of guy. He's this type of pitcher. This is what he is in his career. So to expect him to be what the pitching lab made him for 12 starts, like, nobody's talking about the pitching lab now, right? Why aren't we talking about the pitch lab? You know why? Because a lot of times pitchers revert back to what they usually are. And that goes for bad pitchers that were used to being good, like a Sean Manaea, who changed a couple of things mechanics-wise, which is not a pitching lab situation. It was just Manaea watching Chris Sale pitch and saying, hey, I can throw like that. That's not pitching lab. That's making mechanical adjustments. Luis Severino, we know he was really good. We know how good his stuff is. What was his problem? Injury. Had nothing to do with the pitching lab. Right? We act like the pitching lab is this sought-after thing where it's like, oh my God, look at these guys. These are guys that have done it before. Sean Manaea and Luis Severino done it before. It was complete changes in one, Manaea in mechanics. Severino had a sleep disorder and was often injured. The Mets helped with the sleep disorder by finally getting to a specialist, and he stayed healthy. That's not pitching lab, right? We have to understand. And another thing with Griffin Cannon too, I know we play everybody, and it's a balanced schedule, but he has been in the American League his career. He comes to the National League. You don't see him often if you're a National League team. So it's going to take time for hitters to adjust. And it's not shocking that they're progressively getting worse. There's nothing to look at when it comes for Clay Holmes because he's been a reliever his whole life. So we really have to, put this whole situation on a plate here and examine it. Let's be honest about this. Not saying the Mets are in trouble, even though they made it very interesting. I tell you that. Going into this series against the Rays during this weekend, we were 5.5 games up on the Phillies. Now we're 2.5. The Braves got their ass kicked today, so we don't lose any ground on them, but they've played well. So you got the Phillies, who play the Marlins now, and the Mets are going to Atlanta. And regardless of if you think we slayed the dragon, which I do believe we have, it's not going to be easy. This is the Braves' opportunity to get back in this quote-unquote race for division or for their playoff hopes. So this is the main issue that the Mets put themselves in. And there was a report by Jim Bowden about the Mets going after high leverage bullpen arms. Well, yeah, of course. You know why? One, because they're cheaper. And two, you probably don't have to give up as much as you would have started a top line starter. So we're hearing reports about this. Not saying that they're true or not. Nobody really knows, except for David Stearns and the internal brass of the Mets. It's just very concerning that this is the issue. Now, again, the offense wasn't good, right? I mean, you can't give up 9 runs and expect to win. We gave up 8 yesterday. We gave up 9 today. The offense just can't do that every single time, even though they haven't done it much. But even still, we can see the pitching is getting progressively worse, little by little. Has it been a topic of conversation because the Mets have been finding ways to win ball games, right? They just came off before this series, winning 6 in a row. So we have to make sure that we understand the problems with this team, right? I've been saying it, right? I've been quoted by many people and many that I'm Mr. Negative. But am I wrong? No. I've concerned myself. Every time I've been saying this, you can go to every show, every pregame show, every postgame show, every solo show, every co-host, every duo show, whatever show I do on my channel or anybody else's channel. I continue to bring up the situation with the pitching, right? I'm not fooled by the excellent pitching by the New York Mets early in the season. I'm not fooled by that. I'm just not. I look at careers and I say, okay, are we really believing that Griffin Cannon is a completely different pitcher? Met fans last year and going into this year, and specifically about the pitching lab, about how amazing that this thing is. They talked about Minaya and Severino, guys who've done it before. They just had issues in their careers that stopped them from being the pitchers they were previously. So we're going into a season with a bullpen arm turning into a starter. Now, I'm not saying Clay Holmes can't do it because we've seen Seth Lugo. We've seen multiple guys do it over the years, the last couple of seasons to be exact. So I'm not saying Clay Holmes can't be an established starter. We have no idea what type of starter he's going to be over the next 3 years of this contract with the Mets. No idea. So maybe I can brush that off a little bit with Clay Holmes. Who knows? Do I trust him this year to pitch the amount of innings that he needs to pitch and into the playoffs? That's a question mark, and that's yet to be determined. Griffin Cannon, I mean, let's just look at it because I just really wanted to just break it down just a little bit. Let me just double check what I'm doing here just to make sure. I'm just going to pull it up. I want to pull up his stats real quick. All right, here we go. Baseball reference to the rescue. All right, so career ERA, 4.61. Now, it went down under 5 in his career because of the great start he had this year. Now it's all the way up to a 3.22, which is not terrible, but when you're under 2 and you jack up 30 something, points to your ERA, it's a big jump, right? From 2019, 4.58, 3.99, 5.60, didn't pitch in 2022, 4.32 and 5.19. That was last year. All right. Last year was the most amount of games he pitched, 31. He threw 174 innings. So I know we can do that. That's good. But this is his career. This is his 7th season. Well, technically 6-year pitching, but 7 years in the big leagues. And he's never been good. So what do we expect? Like, why are we shocked by this? I'm not. Everybody can pull the blanket over your eyes and make you miss the obvious situation that, yeah, the pitching line might help you throw certain pitches better and what pitches throw more of, but it doesn't change exactly who you are. So I just don't understand the fact that people went goo goo gaga and went crazy with the pitching lab. And who's it really helped? Who has it really helped? Like, could we go through a full season of these pitchers that are career bad pitchers, which Griffin Canning is? He's jumping to a new league. And we all know it takes months, if not a year, for teams to figure out and have a book, a real book, and to adjust as a lineup to certain pitchers. We see it every year. I talk about this all the time. If you've been on my channel for a while, I've said this enough. It takes a while for teams to have a book on you and then see you enough to adjust. And this is what worries me about going this approach with pitching. Because I said this in the pregame. Find me a rotation that the Mets put together over the last 2 seasons. Now, Minaya and Severino are different because they had success in their career, where they've made runs in a postseason, got to a World Series, won a World Series in, let's say, a 5-year span that didn't have top-line starters. You can say whatever you want about Kodai Senga. I don't trust him as far as I can throw. To be quite honest with you, I just don't. He's been injured twice in 3 years that he's been a Met. All right, I don't care if it's a fluke injury, and he stretched to catch a ball and he pulled a hamstring. Like, Jesus Christ, these are professional athletes here. So I do understand that I'm titled Mr. Negative, but if I'm saying something that's not a fact, you can call me out on it, and I'd be glad to listen to you or see your comments. But this has been an ongoing issue. It's been my biggest concern, and I'm still not worried about the offense. I know the offense still hasn't been good, and I'll be the first one to say that. But this is a team, and the majority of this core doesn't start doing well until around this time, heading towards the end of the month. They've done that in their career. Just look at the Mets' numbers in April and May, and then when June comes around, it starts to pick up. And they have, over the last 2 weeks, they have started picking up. They went from 29th in runners in scoring position to like 25th. And average has been better. All that stuff has been better. But it hasn't been much better, but they're progressively getting better. So I'm not worried about the lineup. I think the lineup's going to be fine. And this is the time when they're usually going to start picking it up. Because all these guys, and I'm talking about the core, with Nimmo and Lindor and Alonso, Jeff McNeil, these are guys that start to come on even more production-wise with runners on base, runners in scoring position around this time. It's just a fact. Look at their numbers in June. It starts to pick up. So am I worried about the offense? No. I think the offense is going to be what we're going to expect it to be as a whole. I like this 1 through 4. I like Nimmo in the 2-hole. I like Soto. I think Nimmo in the 2-hole just makes so much more sense. He's been a completely different hitter since moving to the 2-hole about, 13, 14 games ago? So it's been working. We have been winning games. I mean, we got to over 20 games over 500. Now we're 18 games over 500, but it's working. So with the rotation as a whole, it's concerning because we're believing and trusting in guys that either hasn't done it in their career, has not been good in their career, and that is 2/5 of our rotation in Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning. Clay Holmes, we have no idea. If you can say whatever you want to say about Clay Holmes, you can talk about his stuff, you can talk about whatever. You can talk about whatever you want about Clay Holmes. There's nothing to tell me in the past that he's going to be a good pitcher for a full season along with the postseason. Griffin Canning, I just gave you the numbers. Not a good pitcher in his career. You don't just miraculously find it and become a 2.8 ERA pitcher, which he has been for the Mets. You just don't do that. Now, get into the midway of his starts where he's around, 12, 13 starts this year. More teams have seen him for a second time. There's more of a book on him when it comes to that, and he's not pitching as well. Tyler McGill lost cause, but he's in the rotation because of injuries. Shomania didn't look good today in his start. But again, we're worried about minor league numbers. I'm not. These guys are working on things. They're probably mostly throwing fastballs just to get their pitch count up. So, and that's the same thing for Montas as well, along with Mania. Who cares about the numbers? They're throwing mostly fastballs to get their pitch count up. They're not throwing 30 breaking balls and off-speed pitches to, strike out all these guys. They're throwing predominantly fastballs. Go look at the Montas start where he gave up 150 runs. He's throwing about 90% fastball. Why is that? Because you got to get your pitch count up. That's all that matters. Is building up that arm strength. Same thing with Mania. So this is why when people talk about Montas, hasn't really been a good pitcher, but he's been proven. Yes, it's been a few years, but go back to 2023, if I'm not mistaken, when the Yankees traded for him. He was having a really good season. He just was hurt when the Yankees traded for him. That was only a couple of years ago. Same thing with Mania. It was around 2022 or so where he was still pitching very well. Go back. Same thing with Severino. Same thing. This is why you got guys that I'm okay with, guys like Montas, guys like who we're talking about, Sean Mania now. Until these guys come back and pitch on a major league mound, I don't want to have a conversation about them as to, we just need them to come back into the rotation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that I know Montas, when healthy, can give you veteran starts, right? He was supposed to be somewhere around the 4th or 5th starter. Mania was supposed to be in top 2 in this rotation. That's a big loss. But we also do know that those are professional pitchers. Those are veterans that have pitched well in their career. I can have a conversation and have an argument of why I trust them more than Griffin Cannon, regardless of what his numbers say. Or even the same thing like Clay Holmes. Because there isn't proof that Griffin Cannon is going to be good. There is no past of Clay Holmes that tells me he's going to be a good pitcher in the rotation long term for a season into the playoffs. Even Montas, even with the A's, had good postseason outings. So he has that experience. Not saying that Montas is going to come in and pitch, lights out. But nobody believes he can't throw 4 innings like a Griffin Cannon or 3 2/3 like Tyler McGill yesterday. He probably could. He could be just as bad. But I'm more confident that Montas will throw better games than Tyler McGill more often than not and give your team a chance to win. Somebody posted a stat of Tyler McGill in March and April. It was like around the 3 ERA. May into June, it's over a 5 ERA. And if you add July into that, it's almost a 6 ERA. Again, inconsistent Tyler McGill. Now, Tyler McGill wouldn't have been in this rotation if there wasn't injuries. So it's hard to kill him when we know he's not a good starter. He's just not. And I suppose you could talk all we want about Christian Scott. This is the other thing. Now he looked good at times, but the Mets were gonna baby the shit out of him. This guy would never pitch innings. He would go 5 innings at the most. So in his start, along with Senga's start, where at least, not really Senga's start, but in Christian Scott's start, you were gonna need 4 bullpen arms, maybe even 5, because if he has a pitch count limit, and he was going to have one if he didn't get hurt. That's what we're going to be talking about. That's the issue. Well, yeah, the upside is absolutely there. And, once you get into a certain point, you can't worry about pitch limits. and innings limits, which the Mets were definitely going to worry about. That's why when people say, "Oh, bring up Jonah Tong, he's pitching great," why? So we can give you 4 or 5 innings of really good pitching, and he can be dominant, and you're going to take him out because you got to watch his pitch count, you got to watch his innings limit, and you still got to use 4 or 5 bullpen arms. How is that really helping the team when you got basically a half a game to worry about still? So that's what I worry about. That's why if you're going to bring these guys up, the same reason why it's stupid to have all these young prospects up, position player-wise, when it's a logjam because they all can't play. It doesn't benefit them, and it technically hurts your team a little bit because when you do got to play these guys, like Acuna, I know he had a hit today, but he looked like he hadn't picked the bat in months because you don't play him. Like, it's just frustrating because we overlooked the issues because we were winning. And you get the the tag of being negative and being grumpy and where's the positive outlook? Well, there is positive outlook because of the lineup, because there's more than enough proven guys that tells me they're going to do it at some point. Like that I'm not worried about. But an unproven rotation will definitely get me worried and have concerns. And let's be honest, guys, this is a very unproven rotation. Even Peterson, as much as I like David Peterson, he's a bulldog. This is a guy pitching 170 innings last year, coming off of hip surgery, and we need him to do that again and pitch just as good. Because there's no guarantee from Senga, Clay Holmes, Griffin Cannon. Griffin Cannon maybe innings-wise, but there's no guarantee he's going to be good with those innings. So you're getting most of these guys that we really have no idea. So it's an unproven rotation with many guys that you brought in that were on the cheap. Kodai Senga didn't cost Yamamoto or Oroki Sasaki type of money. Now, I'm not saying Senga's a bad pitcher. By no means he's bad. But 2 out of the 3 years, he's been hurt. You're not on the field. You don't help us. So the pitching is my biggest concern. And I'm not surprised why everybody are talking about it now. Gary Cohen just brought it up today. The Mets starters have gotten progressively worse over the last week or so. 2 weeks. The Mets have been winning ball games, so people don't care. A couple of games, we don't come back late in the games. We lose those games. So that is frustrating because fans are smarter than this. It's just that you just sweep it under the rug and act like it's not a big deal because we're winning, when it absolutely is. You got a red-hot Atlanta team that have been scoring a bunch of runs since Acuna's come back. Now, I know they got their ass whipped today against Colorado, but they've been red-hot. You got a Phillies team that have been hitting the ball all over the place now. And I'm not saying the Mets can't beat these teams. I truly believe we can. We're better than them, or at least right there with them, and I don't care what the Braves record is, they're always dangerous. That's a dangerous team. And again, they play us 7 times in 10 days. This can change rather quickly, and I talked about this. The Mets' goal for Atlanta, when we play them 7 times in 10 days, is very simple. Be around 500 during those 7 games. 3-4, 4-3. You don't want them to go 5-2 or 6-1 and God forbid 7-0, because that puts them right back in the playoff hunt and right back in the conversation about division with 3 more months to go into the season. Because if you do go 500 in those 7 games, there's not much damage either way, expanding your lead or decreasing your lead from the Braves. Now, I expect that the Phillies are going to be with that at the very least 2.5 games behind us when we play them after the Atlanta series. So by all means, the Phillies are going to be right there with us when we go into Philadelphia. And as much as I like Mendoza, I think Stearns has done a good job. Now, I complain about the pitching, and I think that's an issue. I think Stearns with the bullpen, I think he always figures it out, and that's been proven. Like, one thing I'm confident is that David Stearns is going to figure out this bullpen one way or the other. The rotation, I don't trust. But you could see going into Atlanta, we're going to have David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, and I'm not sure about the third starter in Atlanta. It might be Tyler McGill. We'll see. But the Mets they weren't setting themselves up for the Atlanta series at all. The Braves are. That's how, now again, this series is much more important for the Braves than the Mets in overall, scenarios, because if the Braves have a bad series against the Mets, let's say two out of three, well, the Braves are further behind, and it kind of hurts them even more. If the Braves win 2 out of 3, it's like, all right, sucks, but it's not the end all be all. The Mets most likely will still be in first place, or at least tied for first place by the end of that series. So it's frustrating because I just don't like the fact that we're counting on too many pitchers that are unproven or have never been good in their career. And that's why I can't wait for Manaea, who has a proven track record, and I can't wait for Montas, because Montas means no more McGill. Manaea is probably going to go into the Kodai Senga / Blackburn spot. So that's already better than what that is when it comes to McGill getting out of this rotation. So with the Mets losing 9-0 today and getting swept for the first time this year, again, we're going to have this type of series, right? This is a tough go of it, no doubt about it. The Mets were kind of due. It's probably the worst time to have it when you're going to face your division rivals over the next 10 days, or 10 games, I should say. That's going to be frustrating. And that's frustrating just in that aspect of things. But, Phillies got Miami, which, you just assume the Phillies would take 2 out of 3. You assume. You never know. But we just got to play better. The pitching that I expected was going to get a little worse. I'm not going to say they're going to fall off the map, but I figured they were going to be a little average than what they were currently doing, which was best in baseball. I expect them to come back to the pack a little bit, and they have. If you notice, when the offense doesn't do their job and your pitching doesn't put up zeros or 2 runs or less, and you're giving up 4, 5, 6 runs, you're going to have a hard time winning ball games. It was easy because the Mets pitching was giving up 3 runs or less, it seemed like every game. So, and the Mets were always in the game. When you're giving up 4+ runs, it's hard for an offense that has been struggling to even come back in a ball game. This game was over. You think anybody? I thought this game was over when it was 4-0. To be quite honest with you, even when Pete Alonso was up with the bases loaded, I was like, yeah, okay, come on. Pete Alonso has been the best guy with runners in scoring position, but even he's had bad at bats today, and yesterday as well. So I'm a little worried about the pitching. The overall team and where they are right now, they put themselves in a spot to have a bad stretch. Being 5.5 games up, starting the weekend, they put themselves in a good spot to have a rough patch. Everybody has a rough patch. The Mets haven't had one yet. Hopefully this isn't the rough patch in the middle of June, where you would probably, in the next 10 games against Philly and the Braves, I'd take 500, to be quite honest with you, in 10 games. If we go 5-5, I think we're okay. Can't be worse. Can't be 4-6, 3-7, or worse. Give me a 5-5, 10-game stretch, and there's probably not much damage overall. You get 10 games off the schedule, so you'd be over the 80-game mark. You'd be halfway through the season, and hopefully you're around where you are right now, depending on what the Phillies do. So if you go 5-5, isn't much damage happening, because the Phillies would have to go like 9-1 in that stretch, or even 10-0 to really pass you up. And the Braves would have to really dominate. And if you go 5-5, you're kind of not getting dominated by the Braves. And, you don't want to get swept by any of these teams in the series in a 3-game set, or in the Braves case, a 3 and a 4-game set. You don't want to get swept in any of those. But if you take 2 out of 3 here, lose 2 out of 3, or split a 4-game series against the Braves, no damage is really done. Even if you lose the series against the Phillies and take 1 game, it'll overall kind of averages itself out, and you just knock 10 games off the schedule, and now you're at the halfway point, almost at the end of June, when you got the Pirates coming up and then the Yankees after that. So, Mullet, I understand. I get it. But you also almost, you were 2.5 games back not too long ago, and you were ahead of the Mets, and you lost the division back, and the Mets are up. But again, it's a long season. The Phillies have gone through a bad stretch. They're coming out of it now, but they went through a bad stretch. The Mets haven't had one yet. Now, again, it's concerning, because it's right when we're facing the Phillies and the Braves in a 10-game stretch. That kind of sucks. But the Mets have proven this year where you think the tough stretch is going to get prolonged, and they come out and play well. So it's hard to lose confidence in a team that has consistently shown, when they've had a little rough patch of like 2-game lose, they lose, 3 out of 5, and they're kind of struggling a little bit. And they come back in the next series where we're all concerned, and they come out and play well. So I'm not burying this team by any means. Like, would anybody be shocked if the Mets come out and play well over this next 10 games? No, because they've shown it all year. I don't know how they do it. Now, how are they going to do it when their pitching has been struggling over the last 2 weeks and have not pitched really well, with the offense still struggling? That's the biggest problem, is the fact that when the Mets looked like they were going to go through a rough 10-game, 15-game stretch, and they go into that next series and they play well, it's been predominantly because the pitching has been damn good. That's not the case right now. So if this team is going to, bounce back after this sweep in Atlanta, it's got to be the offense. Because I can't count on the pitching to do what they've been doing, because they haven't. So it's either the offense comes alive finally in this 6-game stretch on the road, or we're going to be talking about a tough road trip. So am I concerned about the overall team? No, that's not fair to them. And that's not fair to me to, just completely kill them. Because they've shown over the first 72 games of the year that they find ways out of ruts, out of tough stretches quickly. They've done it. Now, again, the tough stretches have been very minimal, and it's because the pitching has been pitching well, and it keeps you in ball games. Well, you had Griffin Cannon, who was one of your better pitchers over the year so far, have a dud of a game, which he's allowed to. It's not the end of the world. But you also got to be better. And the offense needs to show up. And if they don't, we got Paul Blackburn going on Wednesday, Peterson on Tuesday, and I believe McGill's supposed to be in the finale of the series, but who knows? I mean, I think that's going to be the case. Ricardo, I agree. I think Friday's game was the sign of bad things to come in that series. You don't take out Clay Holmes when he has 79 pitches, mowing them down. You have a 5-1 lead in the fifth inning. You just don't. It's stupid. And I don't want to hear excuses about innings and whatever. I don't want to hear that. That is nonsense. You could have at least took one of these games of the series, start off the series right. And I'm not saying the Mets wouldn't have lost the last two games the way they did. They still could have, but you would have at least picked up a game, and you wouldn't have lost ground, or at least one game to the Phillies like you have lost 3 in a row, basically. So, Michael, you know what? I'm not tuning my own horn, but I mean, Miguel's bad. I'm not saying at all. I could throw a curveball. That's probably it. Well, yeah, Truman, that is the other problem. He doesn't get hit. He doesn't get hurt. Yeah, but he's consistently in this rotation because of injuries. And oh, by the way, right? You want to go to cheap route with Minaya. You want to go to cheap route with Montaz. You want to go, no long-term deals with pitchers. Well, you get Clay Holmes, you get Minaya, you get Montaz. The Mets even went kind of low offer for Kodai Senga. It wasn't a lot of money to give him internationally when he came from Japan. So you get a lot of low risk contracts, yet most of them are hurt. So what is the difference between a high risk contract and a low risk contract for pitchers? Nothing. When they're healthy, you get better performances. And Dola, I agree. Anything cheap becomes expensive. You know what? I got that is great. I couldn't say that better myself, Dolo. 100%. Anything cheap becomes expensive. 100%. You know why? Because the cheap is, if they get injured, it's going to cost you prospect-wise and money, one or the other or both, to replace those guys that are injured with better pitchers at the deadline. If they're healthy and not pitching well, the cheap part kind of comes up in their performance. And you got to go out and pay with prospects or add money or both to get pitching or to get inexpensive players. That's a great comment. It really is. And I give you kudos, Dolo 100%. We don't agree on a lot. We've went through it before, but that's a great comment. It's so true, and that is exactly what the problem is. Truman, I don't know. That is weird because Truman, how many Brave fans used to roll up on my streams all the time, regardless if they're playing us or not. It used to be, 30, 40 of them easily used to troll. But again, when you've gotten humbled, and I think it's when you haven't won a World Series and you finally do in a while, and they haven't had that one since mid-90s, and you finally win one, I think it backs people off a little bit, because in 2022 they were relentless. 2023 they were still there, but it was kind of like it seemed like the shift in a little bit. But after you win a World Series, I think the dogs, they calm down a little bit, and I think that's what it is. Well, it's supposed to. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Like, you can't go the cheap route and expect everything to work out, because the Mets have 3 years, $33 million to Clay Holmes. 1 year, 2 years, $34 million for Montaz, $17 million a year, cheap. Even Minaya, yeah, it was $20 million a year, but it was a low contract. It was a less a year deal. You see Max Fried being the best pitcher in baseball with the Yankees. Yeah, I know it's an 8-year deal. I know Corbin Burns ended up being a disaster. But again, you can't predict injuries. Corbin Burns has never had injuries like that in his career, major injuries. So you can't predict that. Shit happens. So, and you always wonder, it's like, what is the problem? David Stearns has the money. now to do it. He can have the excuse, well, I didn't have money with the Brewers, so I couldn't do what I wanted to do. But his philosophy with starting pitching is not spending a lot of money on the starting pitcher. But eventually, it will cost you. It cost us in the Dodger series. Make no bones about it. It absolutely did. Going low budget at the trade deadline because you don't want to give up prospects, and spending what you did in the rotation ended up being a blessing in disguise only because you got two guys in Manaea and Severino who's done it before. Who basically one stayed healthy and the other changed their mechanics. And that was willfully just by looking at things with Manaea and Severino. So, we'll see. But again, but I understand that. Now, I wasn't big on Snell. I like Snell, but he is a 5-inning pitcher even when he's in the ball game. I wanted Corbin Burnes. Make no bones about it. I did. But this guy's never been hurt in his career. Major injury. So you can't predict that. Nobody can say, oh, well, Burnes is going to get hurt. Nobody predicted that. If there's a guy that constantly... Now, Snell, you can have an argument because he's constantly injured and only pitches 5 innings. But he's very good when he does pitch. So Snell, you can have an argument. But Corbin Burnes, there was no signs of him getting hurt. That's a fact. I wasn't big on Max Fried, but Chris was the one high on him. So what are we saying here? So keep on getting low budget, bottom of the barrel, cheap pitchers and hope they work out. That's not a recipe for success. I don't care what anybody says. That's not a recipe for success. Because you're counting on too many guys for everything to go right. Now, that's why there's a deadline to fix it. But Stearns has not shown that yet. He had an opportunity last year. He went to get Paul Blackburn. Congratulations. You got a fifth starter who barely seen the light of day, didn't even see the light of day in the postseason. Let's be honest. David Stearns has the opportunity to make a big move, and I said this from day one on opening day. I expect to have things work out for the regular season where I don't think the pitching is going to be the ultimate demise of the regular season making the postseason. But will it catch up to you in the postseason? Absolutely. Now it's up to David Stearns to do it at the deadline. There's no excuse for him not to do it. You have one of the best records in baseball. Let's say the Mets are, top 3 in baseball record-wise. That means they're very much contenders. There's no excuse. You got more than enough prospects. You can't even play them at the major league level because there's too many of them, as we've seen already, as we talked about many times on these shows. And you got the money. So there's no excuse. If he doesn't do it this time, then I don't know what to tell you. I just don't. San, I'd give up anything for better starting pitching. Starting pitching, especially at the deadline, does wonders for your team if you already don't have an ace or you already don't have top-line starting pitchers. Again, I did this in a pregame show. I don't know if you were there, Mike, or was it Mike or Sam, during the pregame show. Go back the last 5 years of World Series champions or teams that got to the World Series. Not even World Series champions, but you can throw them in the mix too. Teams that were in the World Series the last 5 years. Look what they did at the deadline. What they needed, they got. And it wasn't low, medium moves like a Paul Blackburn or a Daniel Vogelback or Darren Ruff or Tyler Naquin. They were big moves. Big moves. And it goes on and on. And it's not about the top line guys either. It is the necessity of having guys that better than what you currently have. That's a fact. So I don't know what else to say, except that it came to fruition very quickly in June. Now, again, is this going to derail a season? No. This team is good enough to get through a season and make the postseason. If they don't, it's really a disaster. Then what people are going to say. But you have a deadline to fix the issue. The lineup, yeah, you can get a center fielder, you can get a better bat in center field, and you can increase the offense and have a even better offense. Sure. But it doesn't matter if you don't pitch. We act like the Dodgers were only throwing bullpen games and had nobody pitching in the postseason. They had Yamamoto. They had Buehler. They had Flaherty. They had 3 guys that are rotation guys, good rotation guys, really good rotation arms. We all forget that. They act like they only threw bullpen arms all the time. Like, you got to understand that. You know, I'm not saying the Yankees had great pitching, but you know what? They had an ace in Garrett Cole. And I talk about this so many times. So many times. And I said this in the pregame, and I'm going to reiterate this. Who are you confident in? Let's just say, Game 7, NLCS. Everybody's rested in your rotation. Pick one. Who are you 100% confident in? Now, nobody's perfect. I understand that. But you have utmost confidence in going in Game 7. Everybody will have different answers. You know why? Because you don't have one. And that's including Manaea being healthy. I'm being quite honest about that. Manaea hasn't been an ace since the Oakland A's. All right, he was great last year. Give him all the credit in the world. The Indians finally caught up to him in the NLCS, unfortunately. Now, can he duplicate what he did last year while not throwing no innings for 2.5 months of the season and probably won't come back until the end of the month? That would be great. But you can't predict. You can't guarantee me that Manaea is going to be healthy, number one, and as good as he was last year. Because if he isn't as good as he was last year, he's just as good as everybody else, but not good enough. So here we are on June 15th, 12, 13 starts into the season for most of our pitchers. We had no starts by Manaea, no starts by Montas. Kodai Senga's hurt after 2 months of starting. And everybody who's been pitching well, in Clay Holmes' case, now has innings restrictions, apparently. Cannon has tucked in a step back. McGill is doing what he always does in May and June, being terrible. David Peterson has still been solid, and I expect him to be the one guy that might survive this entire rotation of not falling apart, because he does have really good stuff, and that hip really seemed like an issue for many years. I just worry about his innings for the second year in a row, coming off an injury. So we got a long way to go. We got swept by the Rays. All right. Rough patch. This team has been amazing coming back after a tough series and finding a way to come back and win ball games. So I'm not going to put them down to the ground when they've done it this whole season. But what's been protecting this team with the minimal rough stretches they had, very limited, was because the pitching was so good. That's not the case anymore. So what's going to get us back to our winning ways when we've had a tough stretch? It's got to be the offense, because I don't expect the pitching to turn around. I expect the pitching to be what it is, slightly above average. And that can get you through a season. That can probably get you to a postseason. And we'll talk about that in the postseason when we get to that point. but there'll be many starting pitchers available that are top 2 or aces. Let's just say top 2 starters. There's going to be enough of them available. You better get one. And I don't want to hear, oh, Manaea is like a mid-season acquisition. Okay. Congratulations. How about making it better with Manaea? Ricardo, the bullpen, I don't. Because I think Stearns, one thing that I'm very confident in is that David Stearns is going to figure out to put a good bullpen. You're going to have stretches when you're in your bullpen because, again, they were overused. That they're going to have tough stretches. Bullpens always do that. The best bullpens and the bad bullpens, they all have tough stretches. But I trust David Stearns to do his manipulation with the minors and the major league level pitchers that have options and mixing and matching and making trades at the deadline because he's done a good job of bullpens in his career. That doesn't take a lot of money. That just takes getting the right guys. Stearns has done that. Now, help me with the bats or the rotation. That's something that I think he needs to figure out. So I'm not worried about the bullpen. So I'm just not. Stearns has done that. I want to see the Mets bounce back here, and I want the offense to dominate a series. Have the Mets really dominated a series offensively? Not really. Even the games even the series they swept or they played really well in, the offense has really never dominated the series. It would be nice going into Atlanta and dominating offensively. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of runs scored in this series, in my opinion, against the Braves. The Braves pitching has been getting healthier and better. And, it's going to be swelling back and Sale and all that. And it's two pitchers that the Mets couldn't hit last year at all. We all remember the end of the season where Schwellenbach looking like he was just going to mow us down the rest of the game. They took him out, and the Mets figured it out with the bullpen. But they haven't really dominated the series offensively. They need to do that. They need to finally pick up the pitching a little bit. The pitching has been going through it. They're starting to get, move towards the middle of the pack now, starting to be an above average rotation, barely above average rotation, which I always thought they would be. The offense needs to finally take off here. We're heading to the midway point of the season. We're this close. After this 10-game stretch of games between the Braves and the Phillies, we're at the halfway point of the season. That takes you to the end of the month. You'll have 82 games in, and you got 79 games to go, right? Yeah. 181 games to go. Right? Don't worry about the math. We have half a season to go. This is where the offense needs to take off. Now, once again, individually, their numbers have been very good, especially the top 4 guys. Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso. Individually, them stats look really nice. But when you pack them together, they haven't been good enough offensively with runners on base, runners in scoring position. It's been a huge problem. It's about time because the Mets have been getting people on base. That is not a problem. They've had men on base consistently all year. They just haven't had enough big hits in a game or in a series combined where I could say, damn, that offense really dominated the series. It would be really nice to do that in Atlanta. And let's hope they can do that. The Mets lose 9-0. They get swept for the first time this year at home. And in the season, first time this year, they get swept. The Rays beat them 9-0. It was basically a really good series for the Rays. I mean, they were outstanding. They just played really well. They were a hot team coming in offensively. They showed why they're a hot team offensively by coming back in game 1 and dominating games 2 and 3. The Mets had no answers at all, pitching or offense. Obviously, we're off tomorrow, guys. So looking like I'll probably do an off-day show. Maybe I'll get, some other content creators on the show just to have a conversation about, this past week, this homestand, and this coming road trip between the Braves and the Phillies. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Mets Postgame Show right here on the channel and on X. I'll see you tomorrow on a show, off-day show, whatever time it might be. I don't know. It might be around between 4 and 6 o'clock. See if I can get a couple people on the show just to talk about our New York Mets. First time getting swept, guys. The world's not ending, but there is some very alarming concerns with this pitching staff, with this team in general, even though they're 18 games over 500 and still lead the NL East by 2.5 games. Have a good night, guys. Let's go Mets, and I'll see you tomorrow on the off day, guys. Have a good night.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are real.